How city dwellers endured the ancient Roman apartment block. Boring history for sleep. Imagine, for a moment, that you are neither a patrician with a marble atrium nor a farmer working the green fields of the countryside, but a city dweller. In ancient Rome, you live not in a spacious villa but in an insular Roman apartment block, 5 or 6 stories high, rising above narrow, jostling streets. Here, in the shade of these teetering buildings, the majority of Rome's 1 million people pass their days and nights, tucked into tiny rented rooms stacked high above the city. The insula is a marvel of its age, but also a place of constant compromise. The walls are brick or concrete, sometimes faced with stucco, sometimes left rough. Space is scarce and expensive, so your room is small, little more than a cell by modern standards. You enter through a battered door onto a cramped landing. A single window, if you are lucky, lets in light and air, but also the clamor of the street below and the dust of the city's endless bustle. The ground floor is the best address, occupied by shops, bakeries, or taverns whose owners can afford higher rents. Above them, each floor grows less desirable. The stairs, narrow and steep, are a daily test of endurance. There is no running water. Instead, you fetch what you need from a public fountain in the street, carrying it up in jugs and buckets. In the higher apartments, water grows precious, and cleaning, cooking, or even bathing become matters of careful rationing. Your own space is sparse. Perhaps you share a single room with family, or with other tenants, sometimes strangers. A straw mattress, a few baskets for storage, a chipped bowl or cup, a rough table or stool. These are your possessions. In winter, the cold seeps through the bricks. In summer, the upper floors bake under the sun. There is no chimney smoke from the small charcoal brazier you use for cooking, or warmth drifts out the window, sometimes filling the room with soot. Life is lived in public as much as private. The insula is not just a building but a collection of lives intertwined. Neighbors' voices carry through the thin walls, and the shouts of hawkers, the clang of blacksmiths, the laughter of children in the alley below, all form the backdrop of daily existence. Food, for most, is bought from street vendors or communal kitchens. Bread, olives, dried fish, chickpea stew. Cooking in the apartment is risky. The fear of fire is constant, and landlords often ban flames altogether. Sanitation is primitive. There are no indoor toilets. Instead, you walk to a public latrine down the street, or use a chamber pot that is empty to fit all into the gutter below. The street, in turn, is washed only by rain or by the efforts of city slaves, who sweep refuse and filth to the sewers. Disease is common, especially in crowded neighborhoods, but the insula is also alive with community. Tenants look out for one another, sharing news and gossip, watching each other's children, or helping with burdensome chores. In the evenings, the stoops and landings become gathering places, where stories are swapped and bread is shared. The landlord is a distant figure, sometimes fair, sometimes neglectful, collecting rents through intermediaries. Repairs are made only when absolutely necessary. Collapsed stairs, leaky roofs, or crumbling walls are facts of life. Still, to live in an insula is to be part of the Roman city's beating heart. Everything is close at hand: markets, baths, temples, and the ever-present crowds. The days are noisy and busy, the nights broken by the creak of timbers and the distant bark of dogs. Life is not easy, but for many, it is preferable to the isolation and monotony of rural life. Yet what happens when disaster strikes, when fire rips through the wooden floors, or the building itself begins to crumble? How do tenants cope with the hazards and instability of insular life? And what strategies emerge to keep a fragile community together? As the sun sets and the city quiets just a little, the dangers of life in a Roman insula come to the fore. For all its vibrancy and opportunity, the apartment block is a place of risk, and everyone who calls it home becomes an expert in endurance and adaptation. The greatest threat is fire. Charcoal braziers, hasty cooking, candles, and oil lamps are all necessary, but in cramped, wooden-floored insula, even a spark can mean disaster. At any hour, a sudden shout or acrid smell warns of trouble. Those on the ground floor might flee quickly, but for families on the upper stories, the only way down is a narrow, twisting staircase if it's not already choked with panicked neighbors or smoke. Ladders and ropes are kept on hand, and some tenants even sleep with bundles packed for a quick escape. The city authorities employ vigils, fire brigades equipped with buckets, axes, and pumps, but their reach is limited, and in the chaos of a night blaze, many must fend for themselves. Structural collapse is another hazard. Insulae are built for profit, not permanence, and some landlords cut corners, using cheap materials or building too high. Walls crack, stairs sag, roofs leak. Minor repairs are done by tenants themselves. Major problems are ignored until catastrophe strikes. From time to time, whole buildings collapse, burying those inside. Even the great Augustus, Rome's first emperor, issued edicts to limit building heights and improve safety, but enforcement is inconsistent. Rumors of sudden disaster travel fast, a warning, if not always a prevention. Yet, even with these dangers, life persists. Tenants develop routines and rules to manage risk, cooking only in the daylight, keeping corridors clear, forming informal watch groups. During the windy winter months, when braziers are most needed, vigilance increases. In times of festival or riot, when the streets fill with revelers and torches, doors are bolted and extra water is set aside just in case. Water, itself, is a daily challenge. There are no indoor taps. Everything must be fetched from street fountains or aqueduct-fed cisterns. Children often bear this burden, balancing clay jars or wooden buckets as they trudge up endless stairs. Some insulae have communal wells in the courtyard, but these are rare. Without regular cleaning, containers grow foul, and waterborne illness is common. Typhoid, dysentery, and other diseases flourish, especially in crowded blocks where hygiene is hard to maintain. The daily routine is shaped by necessity. In the morning, tenants sweep their doorways, trade greetings, and queue at the nearest fountain. Food is purchased fresh and eaten quickly without refrigeration. Leftovers spoil. In the heat, many residents make do with little: a hunk of bread, a bowl of lentils, perhaps fruit or cheese, if fortune allows. Most meals are shared. Communal kitchens, called popane, line the streets and offer simple stews or roasted meats. These kitchens are gathering places safe, if smoky and full of news. The insula social bonds are strong, forged by hardship as much as by proximity. Neighbors take turns watching for trouble, share what they can in lean times, and help each other during illness or grief. Children play together in the alleyways, their games watched over by a collective of mothers, aunts, and grandmothers. Quarrels erupt, of course, over noise, over shared walls, over water or waste, but are usually settled before reaching the landlord or the city's courts. Trust is a necessity. In emergencies, a reliable neighbor can mean the difference between safety and disaster. And all the while, life carries on above and below. The street below your window is a world of its own. Vendors hawk figs or lamp oil, dogs and goats roam freely, and processions for festivals bring music and color. On the upper floors, laundry flaps on lines, and tenants lean out to gossip or exchange news. At night, the city's clamor settles to a hum, interrupted now and then by laughter, by the wailing of an infant, or by distant shouts in the market district. But what happens when city politics or nature brings true upheaval, a riot, an epidemic, or a quake? How does a fragile community weather the storms of empire, and what becomes of these humble dwellings as Rome itself changes? The insula is never entirely at peace. Even when the routine of daily life persists, fetching water, sharing meals, haggling with the landlord, there is always a sense that events beyond your walls can turn everything upside down. Sometimes, it is the city itself that erupts. Rome is prone to riots, disputes over bread prices, angry crowds demanding justice, or sudden outbursts during elections or festivals. In the crowded neighborhoods where insulae stand shoulder to shoulder, panic spreads quickly. Families gather their valuables, children are kept close, and doors are bolted against the chaos. The upper floors offer a better view but little protection. Stones and torches can reach even the highest windows. When order returns, there are new rumors of burned-out apartments, of tenants forced to move, of landlords raising rents or selling out to wealthier buyers. Disease, too, is a constant shadow. When plague comes to Rome, it finds easy prey in the crowded rooms and shared wells of the insulae. Illness moves floor by floor, neighbor to neighbor, often leaving behind empty beds and quiet doorways. Some flee to the countryside, if they can afford it, while others rely on prayers, home remedies, and the watchful care of their neighbors. The city's doctors and priests do what they can, but for most, survival depends on the strength of the community. Natural disasters remind everyone how fragile the buildings and their lives can be. Earthquakes, rare but feared, cause walls to crack and tiles to rain down into the alleys. Heavy rains can turn stairways into waterfalls. Winds batter the rooftops and send shutters clattering. The city's firefighters and builders patch up what they can, but the damage is often left for tenants to endure. Yet, despite everything, the insulae persist. They are repaired, rebuilt, or replaced, always filling with new tenants drawn by Rome's opportunities and its restless energy. Over time, some blocks are abandoned, left to collapse, or scavenged for bricks. Others are bought up by the wealthy and rebuilt as grander houses, or cleared to make way for new temples, markets, or public baths. As Rome itself changes with the decline of empire or swelling with later revivals, the insula's fate is a quiet marker of the city's fortunes. For centuries, they are the city's pulse, home to laborers, craftsmen, shopkeepers, immigrants, and families. When they fade, their absence is barely noticed in the great sweep of history. But their memory lingers in the bones of the city foundation walls unearthed in later centuries. Fragments of pottery, soot-blackened bricks, or the shadow of a staircase on a ruined wall. In the end, the story of the insula is not one of grand architecture or noble ambition, but of everyday resilience, of families who endure heat, cold, fire, and want, of neighbors who share burdens and joys, of a city always on the brink, yet always alive with voices and stories. So as you drift to sleep, imagine the hush of a Roman night, tenements stacked high under the moon, the distant bark of a dog, and the gentle creak of timber floors. Think of the ordinary lives lived within those walls, each day a quiet act of adaptation and endurance, shaping the city in ways that the grandest temples and forums never could.